from Coventry University. We're talking about upskilling residents to be community researchers. Sinead is the Director of Research Development and founder of the Fab Lab at Coventry University. She specialises in the design, implementation and evaluation of living labs as urban innovation spaces using a range of participatory methodologies and approaches. So I'll stop sharing my slide now so Sinead can share hers. But please, throughout her presentation, use the chat and the QA function to post your questions. And also at the end, we'll enable the camera and the microphone options should you want to raise your hand and ask your question in person.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack, and welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your precious lunchtime hour to hear this discussion of how we've been working with the health research collaboration to implement our community research programme. Jack, apologies, can I just check that the slides are clearly visible?
Yep, they're showing.
Okay, then I'll just describe a bit about what we're going to talk about today. So firstly, I'll introduce where our community research programme, which we call the Citizen Social Science programme, came from in Coventry initially, a bit of the background behind how we were able to do that and to work so closely with our local authority. I'll then describe a little bit about what citizen social science community research is, and please forgive me for those of you that are fully aware of what this is. I won't spend too long on that. And then I'll bring it to life for you with some examples from some of our citizen social scientists themselves. And then I'll finish up explaining how we plan to implement the work going forward to support the HDRC, and already some of the themes and topics that have been identified through our co-creation workshops with local community and voluntary sector. Okay, so we were able to hit the ground running within the HDRC with this programme because we had already had a long and well-established partnership with Coventry City Council, where we used our city. It's quite a small city really compared globally, and so it means that it's quite a good size to innovate. And so for a long time, since 2011, Coventry have had City Lab Coventry. Now this is effectively opening up the city for experimentation, for companies and for local residents to try new things in an already open innovation ecosystem. And what underpins that is active and not passive citizen engagement, an ability to bring a mix of stakeholders together. And so in the university, we would term that the quadruple helix, which for us means that brings together civil society and citizens, the private sector, the public sector, and research. And so by having this living lab over time since 2011, we've been able to build that open innovation ecosystem that already has a lot of partnerships in place, making it easier for us to try new things. To aid that process, not everyone's a researcher, and so we want to make sure that we have very accessible methodologies. And so one of the methodologies that we've been using for quite some time in our living lab in Coventry is the citizen social science and citizen science. And so we had been running low carbon vehicle trials, and in the very early days we had been running trials on smart energy meters. And for example, quite a few years ago we had some demonstrator smart energy meters in the local library for local residents to play around with. And so we thought that this engagement from the local community was so rich and is able to inform research and product development, but we were still missing having lines of inquiry and research questions and research projects actually coming from the citizens themselves. And so we were very fortunate in the city that we did win a significant amount of funding in 2018 2018, I think it was. And this was a project that was envisaged by myself at Coventry University and my colleagues in the Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations and the migration team and public health team in Coventry City Council. It was a £4.3 million programme, and the idea behind it was to use this living lab that we had built up over years to test a new approach to the integration of migrants and refugees, but very much taking what we had learned before, that we wanted this to be driven by the local residents and by citizens. And so because we had such a significant amount of funding, because we had that vision where we wanted the research questions, we wanted the practical projects to come from the community, we were able to work with the local community organisations, asylum seekers and refugees themselves to co-design what a community research programme might look like that would be accessible to them, that would enable them, even if they had language difficulties or if they had a disability that might make it difficult for them to undertake research as it's in its formal form. And so we were able to benefit from local residents' own lived experience and expertise in co-designing a community research project and programme and accredited course that would work for them and would help them to communicate to decision makers, to policy makers, to researchers what's happening in their community. So we took this migration friendly city project and we underpinned it with a co-designed citizen social science course. Now that project ran across Coventry, Birmingham and Wolverhampton. We had 31 different actions in there. All of the research had to lead to practical actions that were then evaluated by our citizen social science scientists, and we learned again, we went again, we implemented again. So very much an iterative design. And even though that project has ended, the collaborations and the tools that were created and our alumni citizen social scientists are still in the city and are available as a capacity and resource that we can use. So that was the history of where the citizen social science programme came from. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the difference between typical citizen science, which people tend to be more familiar with, and our approach that we're using in Coventry, which is the citizen social science. So I'm sure some of you are aware of the annual Christmas bird count. So that's very much a citizen science project that's been going since the early 1900s, and it's very much engaging citizens to gather quantitative data. So they have a look out of their garden on Christmas Day, and then they count the different species of birds that they've seen, and then they provide that information to researchers, which gives them mass data from which to work from. You also have citizen science kits, which you can provide to local residents to help measure air quality, and they can even help to build the kits and to learn about different sensors and different measures for air quality. And then another example here of citizen science is NASA's. It's called NEMONet, very cute. And what that is, it's engaging school groups, children, adults in identifying different parts of coral reef and uploading it. And whilst they're doing that using the NEMONet citizen science application, they're teaching the artificial intelligence how to recognise different types of coral reef. So there's a long established history of citizen science and also citizen social science, but it's citizen social science that we were interested in Coventry because we really want to understand from a deep perspective how local people are living their lives and the day-to-day barriers that they're experiencing. So different to citizen science, which is very much data, quantitative, crowdsourcing data from citizens, citizen social science allows you to just get that little bit deeper understanding of what's going on in communities. And so I've included here from National Geographic, their definition of citizen science, but we co-designed our programme with local people and it was very important to make it accessible. And so from our point of view, citizen social science, it's got lots of different names. We've called it that in Coventry because, in all honesty, we were able to be awarded the funding because we had used citizen social science as a terminology. There is literature from UCL and other universities that expresses the value of citizen social science. So that's the reason why we called it that. But it's basically community research, or peer action research. And the reason we do it, and we continue to do this in Coventry, is I think it's a way of changing how social research is done. And the more citizen social scientists from our local city we have qualified and that have been through the programme and that are undertaking their own research and feeding the results back into policymakers and funders, then the stronger the community will be. And I genuinely think we have an ability then to change how social science is delivered in our city. And we really are starting to see that rich data coming through, particularly from communities that would be difficult for me to engage with, for example. And then from the citizen scientist point of view, it can be quite resource intensive. We're requesting a lot of residents to undertake this training, but from their point of view, they can learn new skills. They can work on a project that's of interest to them and is of interest to their community. They can get their voice heard. Once they're qualified, as we build up more of a capacity within the city, we are able to advertise opportunities to our citizen social scientists that have been through the course to undertake work for example, the West Midlands Combined Authority, us here at Coventry University, and our colleagues at Coventry City Council. So now that we have that resource in the city, we are able to provide some short-term paid employment, and we are able to access those trained citizen social scientists to inform the research that we do. So hopefully that's given you a good background on where the citizen social science programme came from, why it was important to us. But I think to bring that to life, it's better that I use some examples from some of our participants. So as part of the Migration Friendly City programme, we trained 72 citizen social scientists, I think. And I hope Last will not mind me using the example of her project, but she was an individual who came to us on the first cohort of the Citizen Social Science programme. And at the time, we had a visiting professor from South Africa who specialised in an arts-based participatory methodology. And she worked with Last and mentored her to implement this arts-based methodology called A River of Life. Now, that methodology was appropriate for Last, our citizen social scientist, because she was working with a group of Black African homeless men. She would work with that group and support them every Tuesday. And they found it difficult to talk about their mental health challenges. And so Last was very well known to that community. She was trusted. She had the citizen social science training, and she had that additional support of a researcher who specialised in an arts-based methodology that was proven to be useful in talking about difficult topics. And then Last also had access to a counsellor to be on hand for the session when she delivered and requested of her group to talk about the journey of their life by drawing the river. So here is an example of what a river of life will look like. And so for someone who might struggle to use terminology like mental health challenges, what you'll see here is someone has drawn a rock, and then you can ask them a question. Okay, so you've got your river there and there's a rock. So why have you put a rock there? And then they can talk about what that obstacle was, how it was difficult for them. And then you can see after the rock, there's a boat. So they were obviously able to get over the rock and then sail away until the next obstacle arrives. So this is a really good example of where a citizen social scientist has access to a community that's very difficult to reach. She has trust within that community. And then a researcher has a very accessible methodology that she can avail of to help a discussion and a dialogue. And from that, you get very important data that can be fed back in to the public health and other departments, for example, that can help them perhaps intervene earlier or identify where problems arise in people's lives earlier. The second example comes from a project we had with the Godwin Lawson Knife Crime Charity in North London. And so this was a mixture of using citizen social science, or you can call it community research, to inform how an artificial intelligence program might be built to support young people experiencing violence. Now, these were 63 14 to 19-year-olds from North London. And we had to deliver this program during COVID, so we had to find new ways of supporting those young people to talk about very difficult topics when we're not in the room. And there's positives and negatives to that, but one of the positives is I used an online whiteboard here. I used Mural, and I chose Mural deliberately because the young people could log into it anonymously, so they could write whatever they wanted and we wouldn't be able to identify who had written that. Now, why was that important? Well, we were asking them about what topics and challenges they experience in their life. We were asking them about problems with their family that they might have, if they had experienced violence or been a perpetrator of violence. And so this was a really useful tool, and actually it was quite shocking, the honest information we got back. So we have a young person there who is experiencing violence within their family. We have another young person who commented that she is anxious every day on the school bus because she hates the walk from her bus to her flats. We have another young person saying that they're being bullied. We have another young person saying that she feels horrible because all of her friends have expensive bags and she can't afford them. So that's probably information you would struggle to get face to face, or that people would divulge in front of their peers. So it shows that there is value to having these anonymous online portals as well. So that's great. So we were able to engage the young people in a discussion about topics they found challenging. Just to make you aware, we undertook this training where the young people were in a classroom with access to a laptop, and they also had access to a counsellor or a school provided counsellor whilst they were undertaking this. And so what did we do with that data? Well, first of all, we used the data to identify the key troubling topics for these young people in that area of North London, and we were able then to work with the health services and other youth services to make sure that we had information provided, but also because it was about co-designing a chatbot for young people, and so we needed to have that information and referral to services in the background. And then it was the young people that co-designed Amaya here. So they actually co-designed what they wanted their chatbot to look like. And then after we had engaged the young people to tell us the challenges that they face, we also got them to train the chatbot to speak like them, because they had said that they would feel more comfortable speaking to an AI that spoke like them. So that's an example outside of Coventry, but I thought it was quite a nice one nonetheless. And then I mentioned earlier that one of the great things for me is that once the citizen social scientists are trained, they're then able to be employed by policymakers themselves to undertake research to access communities that are difficult for policymakers and researchers like myself. And so the West Midlands Combined Authority contacted Coventry University to ask if we had some citizen social scientists that could help them access communities to help inform the development of their mental health commission. So as part of the listening project, we were able to bring back 6 of our citizen social scientists who had links into specific communities in Coventry and Birmingham. And I've just got a couple of quotes from Dorette and Yvonne here about, from their point of view, what was good about the experience. And so you can see that having that power from Dorette's point of view to be able to communicate the voice of her community directly into policymakers was really good. And Yvonne really enjoyed the experience of undertaking research for such a large government body, and then seeing that research in the report that was published on the West Midlands Combined Authority website, and having their work acknowledged in the credits of the report as well. Okay, so I've spoken about where our citizen social scientist course came from. It probably was possible because of that long history of the university and the City Council working together. I think following austerity, having to be more collaborative, and in Coventry they have what's called the One Coventry Plan, which is all about fostering and supporting collaboration. I think that enabled us to hit the ground running with the citizen social science and community research. We've trained about 120, including another 60 community health champions now, so they're quite well embedded in the city, but we can always do more, we can always learn more. And so as part of the HDRC recently, we ran another co-creation workshop with local community and voluntary organisations. And so we brought some of our alumni citizen social scientists to that event to talk to other voluntary and community organisations about their experience of that. And one example was a lady who had been on the course, who herself was a very experienced community development worker. I joined her as a mentor for her project, and she decided that she wanted to work with single mothers seeking asylum and living in a refuge in Coventry. So you can imagine that is not a group as a researcher that I would readily be able to engage with. But by working with that very experienced community development worker in a well-known charity in Coventry that was trusted and was already able to access these individuals in their refuge, then we were able to uncover lots of new data about the challenges they face. And so what we were able to do with that project, because of Lynn from the voluntary and community sector organisation, was that those 6 asylum-seeking single mothers were able to present their research project to a local MP, who came and sat on the couch with them and listened to the challenges that they faced and listened to the data that they presented from their research projects. So even though we had done that, we wanted with the HDRC to go back to local voluntary and community organisations to ask them, this is what we've done so far. You've heard from our alumni citizen social scientists, how can we do better? But how can we start to work together to identify themes that are relevant to health inequalities or wider determinants of health, so that when we run the programme again with voluntary sector and with local residents, we can already start to identify themes that they might want to look at for their research projects. And so what I have here is just some of the post-it notes from that co-creation workshop for the HDRC with the local voluntary and community sector. And we have some themes coming through already. And so men is a theme from 2 points of view. So many services are struggling to engage men, but there is one service that is struggling to engage women. And so the services are hyper-local. So you can see how we might be able to work with individuals from those communities through the citizen social science training to start to unpick that very hyper-local challenge of particular services that are struggling to engage part of the community. Another challenge that was brought up is that there's a stigma around the family hubs. Why are people not accessing the family hubs? Why is there a stigma? So that's another example of a topic that we can now explore that came from the voluntary and community sector challenges that we can use citizen social scientists as part of the HDRC to explore. And then that data, what we find out, can be fed directly back into the HDRC, and perhaps services can be changed, or we can work with the citizen social scientists to understand how individuals that are not reached, or how we can address that stigma attached to family hubs. So in conclusion, we have the programme, but we're never going to stop learning. We can always improve it. What I will say is the citizen social science programme, we are going to pilot it as part of the HDRC again with the voluntary and community sector, and later with residents, and iteratively we will keep re-evaluating, but also practically looking at, is it best for people if we run that face-to-face? Is it best if we run it online? And looking at different ways of delivering so that we get the maximum reach from local residents. You know, people with care responsibilities will have particular hours of the day that suit them better. So we have the programme, we have a fantastic alumni who will continue to support us. We have delivered a co-design session with local voluntary and community organisations, and we now will be piloting the programme for the HDRC again. Just to wrap up before I go to questions and answers, I want to make it clear that this is only the first step, and it's only part of a pathway to impact, if you like. So we provide local people with the skills to research, try and demystify the research, but we don't provide them with the skills to analyse that. We're still at the moment reliant on research and city council staff to support with that. And then also acknowledging that there's a challenge in all of this, in that you train people as community researchers or citizen social scientists, they have the skills, they've uncovered data on the challenges, and then a lot of them will want to do something about it. And that is a gap that we need to acknowledge, and we need to work towards addressing later on. When we had the Migration Friendly City programme, we were lucky that we had small pots of funding for individuals from the community to implement projects. But it is worth noting that that is something to be aware of after you have supported people to undertake their research projects. And so I will stop presenting. Thank you for listening to me, and I would welcome any questions. Just here we have the contact details for the HDRC, the website, and who to get in touch with if you would like any information more widely about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sinead. That was brilliant and really interesting. We've already got a few questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So I think a couple of people asked a similar question around payment for the contributors, especially if people are on benefits. So obviously there's certain implications from the HDRC point of view around NIHR, and Jessica Weeks, who's our public involvement officer in the HDRC, has put some advice in there. But do you have any kind of perspective on that from the point of view of having run the course through the university, especially when it relates to people on benefits?
I do, and thank you so much for raising that question, because it's really important. So we actually have a template that we provide, and this is something we discuss on the first day of training, and we make people aware of the eligibility criteria depending on their circumstance, and we have multiple options. So to meet different people's needs, we have the options of providing incentives in terms of vouchers for supermarkets. I can't remember the exact wording on it now, but we did work with the voluntary and community sector to put together the wording of the number of hours you can participate and what have you. We also have timesheet templates for our citizen social scientists to use, and then we do work very closely when we deliver this programme with the voluntary and community sector, so that if questions arise relating to benefits, then they can get the answers that they need from the experts. So multiple options, and then you have others that are able to be paid, and we have been able to pay as well.
Great, thank you. And then a couple of questions in the Q&A from Sabrina. And I should say, if anyone has a preference to ask their question in person, please raise your hand and we can allow you to unmute. But Sabrina asks, what were the most common factors that attracted the residents to the citizen social scientist role, and then follow that up with what did the training support for citizen social scientists involve? So what attracted to them and what did the training support involve?
Okay, so first of all, citizen social science, it's not it's not the best terminology. Community research is better. If I'm honest, a lot of the individuals that we worked with were referred to us from the local voluntary and community sector, or I have a community facility in the city centre, so they were known to me and to my staff already. So if I'm honest, it was very much making use of word of mouth. Or a lot of the times they might have been on another programme in my community space, and then they'd heard about this and were interested. But also Coventry City Council advertised the Citizen Social Science course to the local migration network. So we use a lot of multiple channels, but we do have a long history of working with organisations in the city. So we're a known entity that are trusted, so that does help.
Great. And then Katerina Glover asks about the ethical considerations of community-led research. So she assumes that ethics are covered in the course, but how does this play out in practice? Do these projects go through a university process or a council process or something else?
Okay, yeah, so it goes through my Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations Ethics Committee, and because we've had so many cohorts of citizen social scientists now, we're able, because of that, to get it quite quickly through our Ethics Committee. We also cover ethical considerations as part of the training, and to bring that to life for you, for example, we will provide training on making sure that the venue you choose, if you're conducting an interview, is safe, it's public, you never knock on someone's door. We suggest that personal data is not held, and any data that comes back to me as a researcher is doesn't include any personal identifiers, but we do, that's actually part of the curriculum that we cover that, and then internally we have our own ethics committee that we submit ethical applications through for this.
Just looking through the chat for further questions. Yeah, we're happy to share the slides and stuff afterwards, I think, Sinead. We're happy to share slides, yeah. And as you can see, the session has been recorded as well. So eventually we'll have a Coventry HDRC YouTube channel where this webinar and the future webinars we run will be uploaded as a resource that people will be able to access. I
did see someone asked how we choose the topics.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
so
yeah.
There's two options. So in an ideal world, we don't choose the topic. It's the local resident that chooses a topic that's very personal to them. However, with the HDRC and our co-creation work, what we've been able to do through the voluntary and community sector, speaking to us about their challenges, is those topics I mentioned earlier. Why is there a stigma around family hubs? Why are women not accessing addiction services? What we can do then when we provide the training to residents is give those topics as examples and then help them to undertake a project of relevance to that topic, but that's personal to them. So you can do it both ways, really open, or use those topics coming through from the HDRC to guide residents.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got Sabrina with your hand up. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm not sure I worded my question correctly initially. I guess I was more interested in understanding what the residents wanted to get out of that role and why they then put themselves forward to be citizen social scientists.
Okay, so when we first started the course, we co-designed it with asylum seekers, and it was really important for them to have a UK qualification. And so it was a level 2 accredited qualification, which is the equivalent to a grade 5 GCSE. And so that was one of the drivers, is that for that particular group we started working with initially, having that UK qualification, but also having time with myself and my colleagues to just ask general questions about living in Coventry and experiences their kids were having at school, understanding what a university environment was about was interesting. So that's one cohort. I mentioned last Mufaba, who was on the first cohort. She's actually now completing her own PhD in this area and has used the skills and her amazing community development work to set up her own social enterprise. We have had a student during the pandemic who was really frustrated with the waste in his apartment block and wanted to create a community garden, and so he did a residence survey of his building and got a compost bin and then the community garden up and growing. So there's multiple reasons why people will choose to go on the course, from upskilling themselves, maybe as a route through to higher education, previously to get a qualification. For the voluntary and community sector, these types of skills are required more and more by funders like the Big Lottery. It's an excellent methodology for evaluating work that you're doing. So we're finding a lot of the voluntary and community sector are recognising it as a useful tool within the delivery of their programmes, but also within their funding applications. And then from the public health perspective, the citizen social scientists that had undertaken work specifically targeted at public health got a lot of value out of being able to refer their neighbours and friends into local health services like the TB clinic, for example. I don't know if that answers it.
That's great, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thanks. There's a couple more questions from the chat, and then we've got Jane and Sarah, the hands up. So we'll go to the chat first. So one was about your example where someone asked what was the change as consequence of women feeding back to their MP. Citizens will need to know that their involvement is catalyst for change.
Yeah, so this is a really difficult one, and it's where having that long history of delivering the citizen social science and it being sustainable is really important, because we don't know what the impact of that is yet. So first hurdle overcome, brilliant that those individuals were able to communicate their challenges, their research to such a high profile individual, but we're yet to see if that has changed, for example, where women in that situation are housed. So some of the data coming back from that was that they were housed outside of the city centre. They struggled to access breastfeeding clinics and services that were in the city centre, and the supermarket nearest to them was the most expensive supermarket. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it, we don't know, but what's important about delivering this as part of the HDRC is the HDRC will be a long-running programme which will enable us to dig deeper into what happens next and so what. Okay.
Great, thank you. And then Jane, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. Quite an interesting topic. I'm particularly interested about ethics. Did you, just to clarify, did you say you created your own ethics committee within the HDRC in Coventry? And if yes, how did you manage that, you know, in terms of additional workload and yeah, if you want to shed more light. Yeah, thank you.
So I work in a research centre in Coventry University. But I've got a 7-year history of delivering projects with Coventry City Council. So I have, and I fortunately have, my own ethics committee in my research centre. So I was able to submit the ethics applications through my research centre for the work that we were doing in collaboration with Coventry City Council. And it just made it that much more easier. And I think that's where the collaboration comes into its own.
Yeah,
and in terms
thank
of
you so much.
And I can add in a little bit about the HDRC itself in terms of ethics. So that's the kind of thing that is one of our key work streams at the moment, is developing those kind of research governance processes in the council. And it's identifying whether kind of some of our research projects need university ethics, whether kind of internal council sign-off might be needed, whether we might need our own ethics processes. So that's kind of a big piece of our work at the moment, alongside all this other exciting stuff that we're supporting.
Thank
And
you.
then just a couple other questions. So a couple of people have asked a bit more about the specifics of the kind of course, so kind of how many sessions is it, how long does it take to deliver, who delivers it. So if you have any insights on that, that would be great. And then the most recent question in the chat is about how do we ensure that the full range of communities in the cities are engaged through initiatives like this, and not just the popular ones, inverted commas.
Okay, I'll answer the latter part of the question first, if that's okay. So we definitely have not had the usual suspects on our citizen social science course. And I think that's because we have had for 7 years a community makerspace in the city centre, specifically aimed at supporting the most vulnerable to gain skills and training to access education, focused on those that are in long-term employment, those that have disabilities. So we have had a lot of people with multiple and complex challenges go through our citizen social science course. We have a young gentleman who completed the course as part of some paid work with the West Midlands Combined Authority, who is autistic, and yes, we did have to put more time into working with him and supporting him, but it's so important to do that because that's not an individual who would be able to tell his story of his lived experience very often. And then referring back to how the course is organised, so sometimes we can have a course where we have some professional community development workers alongside someone like the young gentleman I've just described, and because we've run the course for so long now, we are able to adapt. So in its shortest form, the course has 4 days, quite intensive training, and then it has a gap in between whereby you're assigned a mentor, and the mentor will be myself or one of my colleagues from the university. And if we have the resources to pay them, one of our alumni citizen social scientists. And if we're fortunate enough to have a voluntary and community organisation who has undertaken the training and wants to take on that mentor role as well, then that's another option. We have very specific learning objectives and criteria. So Jack, perhaps I'm more than happy to pop that. I should have put it into the presentation, but I was conscious of taking too long. So what I'll do is I'll send you the slides with the learning objectives and the exact sessions that the 4-day programme covers. Part of the reason why we worked with the local voluntary and community organisations in that co-creation session for the HDRC was to co-design it again practically. How would you like this delivered? How many hours can you realistically commit to? Yeah, we've also delivered just an introduction to, so we've delivered it to people to learn about it, but then they haven't then undertaken the research project. So I think being flexible is key, especially if you want to target those communities that are particularly vulnerable, then having that flexibility built in is important.
Great. Well, that brings us up to past. So apologies if we've missed anyone's questions in that, but thank you very much, Sinead. Very interesting presentation. As you'll hopefully see in the chat, I've posted the links to the website, to our newsletter and our email address, and we'll circulate the slides around afterwards as well for anyone who's interested. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining and taking time out of your lunch. I really appreciate it.
Cheers. See you.
Bye.